Hi again. Greetings. All right. Um, we are going to be talking about UV mapping and projections today. Hopefully, if there's a bit more time, I would go back and touch up on some lighting uh, requirements for some of the thing that we finished up yesterday, so that I can show how to light it and get it to look good. All right. Um, so, but first of all, let's talk about UV mapping and projections. All right. Um, so if I ask the question, your director, art director, or creative director asks you that they want to do a visualization of a magazine or something that has been printed already, or the visualization of an app layout on, say, an iPad or an iPhone screen. All right. Um, and they need it done quickly. They need it done as fast as possible. Um, we have talked about how to bring or add solid colors to the shapes that we have created. All right. But we haven't talked about but let me put it this way. The question is, how do you bring in something that the software does not have? How do you bring in a picture from outside your software, something that you have as an image on your computer, and how do you bring it into 3D, and how do you place it on a surface so that it actually looks like it's um, like that's how it should look. All right. So that's the question that UV mapping uh, tries to answer. Um, so we talked about how knobs are always made up of, in terms of their texturing now, in terms of putting colors or images on top of it. We talked about how a knob surfaces or knob meshes, sorry, knobs meshes, how they have a fixed U and V coordinate. Now your U and V coordinate is simply a measure or dimension with that the software uses to place texture on any surface. So just like you have an XYZ coordinate for positioning and rotating and scaling objects in 3D space, you have a U and a V coordinate for placing texture uh, on any material. Knob surfaces have fixed U and V coordinates, so it doesn't matter how you can't modify the U and V texture. You can paint textures onto a knob surface, all right, but you really will not be able to achieve the sort of complex rearrangement of the texture on a knob surface because it always has a fixed U and V coordinate. Now, the opposite would be true of polygon meshes in the sense that you can rearrange the coordinates, you can rearrange the axis of the U and V coordinate on a polygon mesh. And that technique is how you can bring in your own textures, your own images, and try and fit them onto a surface that may be complex that you have created. All right. I'm going to talk about projection mapping and how that is different from UV mapping. All right. But suffice it to say that we're going to just go through a few examples and then at least get your feet wet on how to create your own maps. All right. So we're going to first of all discuss how to get, say, a magazine layout, a cover magazine layout, how to get it into an image into the software and how to work with that image. Then we're going to try out a can or something that looks like a can, and see how to get um, something that you want to wrap cylindrically around an object, and how you get that in and how you make that work. I won't touch, like, okay, let me go this way and say that Maya has at least a few ways by which it maps a surface. So here's the thing: you have a complex surface that you have created in 3D, all right, and you want to you now want to bring your own texture in on top of that surface, and then you have to decide how Maya will create coordinates for you to place a texture. Now your textures may be uh, spherical, they can be rectangular, they can be squares, but Maya works the best with squares, not just because it's square, but because it understands that there is a exact units for U and exact units for V. Now you can rearrange how that coordinate, how those units of coordinates, how they fit on your object, but you must always put them first within a space where Maya can then interpret and uh, sync, if I can use that word, sync the uh, relationship between your image and the UVs and where you should place it on the object in itself. All right. So um, I'm not going to go into advanced methods that softwares like ZBrush, advanced approaches like in ZBrush where you can paint outside of the UV mesh, or and still, or where you can use multiple UV meshes to map onto an object. But first of all, we're going to talk just strictly about Maya. And in Maya, the coordinate that represents your U and your V is denoted by this box space. Yes, you may be asking about what of all these other boxes. Maya doesn't use that much, especially except for very um, complex object and mapping layouts. All right, but for a basic user who wants to bring an image in, this is the coordinates that you try and fit your image into this square here between 0 and 1 and 0 and 1. So this represents your UV coordinate. Now, whatever image you bring here, the coordinates corresponding to that same shape on your object will take on the image that you have placed here. That may not be fully understood until we go through an example or two. So I'm just going to try and quickly get through this. This lesson is more about how you can stay with me and get an idea of what I'm doing. All right. So I will advise that you watch. I will explain most of what I'm saying so you can do this by yourself later on. All right. So I'm just going to try and create something that looks like a magazine cover here. So I'm going to create the a cover shape and then a bit of thickness to it. All right. So that basically is the shape of our magazine. Just to add a bit of detail to the body, I'm gonna just break that up here. I don't want that much detail on the along the height, so I can just reduce that to this amount. Now I'm going to say that this is the inner part of the object, and so I want to create the cover itself. All right. Um, So let me just so I can get this to exact. I'm in my top view right now. Okay, let me pull this a bit so it feels more like an A4 paper. Okay, so now I want to create a plane so that will be my main cover. All right, so I pull this out and kind of just let it match with this. All right, and create a few divisions here so that it feels Okay, so the match that. All right, so that's our plane highlighted. We're going to bring it up to the top of the object, so it kind of at the top there, and then I want to fold it, or I want to make it open up just a bit so that it feels like an open magazine. So to do this, I need to bring the axis of this plane to a side, right? So that when I rotate, I can rotate it uh, around that axis. Right now, if I rotate it, I'll rotate it into it, and that doesn't work. Although we can work with this, but um, let me just show you that method too. I mean, work with this in the sense that I can do this and then just bring this up to the edge and then try and match the edges like this. All right. But so that's one way to create the opening that I want. You can also undo this. All right. And then change the local axis by pressing my insert button. Right. And then you can see we have moved to local axis mode. Then I can pull this to the very edge of my object just to make sure that we are at the very edge. And that's the front view. Go to side views. All right, so this is the side view, so I can just make sure that I'm right where I want it to be, and then come back to this, then press my insert button again to come back to a normal manipulators, and then I can rotate this, and you can see that it easily rotates across or around that new axis that I created. So this is our um, magazine. All right, let me just come out into my shading view. One way is to click on this box. You see if you hover over it, you can see the tooltip showing smooth shading, or you can come to shading and just select what you want. Before we're on wireframe, um, mode. That's not working now. All right, that's a wireframe. But now I just want to smooth shade everything. So that's what we have. Remember from our last class that we say that this object we start with is called a Lambert. All right, so I can just come to the attributes and select it. You can see that that's Lambert 1. Now we said that Maya usually reserves Lambert 1 for its own as the default input material, but when you want to create your own, you can use some other materials. Now, because I do graphic design, I can decide, for instance, that I want the inner pages of my magazine to be at um, to be art paper, all right, but with very low glossy attributes, and then I want my cover to be a fully glossy cover. All right. So what that means is that you can already begin to think that okay, I have to use a material that allows for a bit of reflection of light for my cover, and one that doesn't. So from the options that we would usually have that come with Maya, you can then think that you use a Lambert for this inner page, all right, and use a font or a blend. I will go with blend for this glossy feel here, and obviously my Lambert for inner pages. All right, so having done this, we will now talk about UV mapping. Now, um, there's a hot button that shows up, and you can see that when I right click on my mouse, I can see this hot menu that shows up. And one of the attributes that we have shown you about edges, vertexes, vertex spaces, faces, but there's one that we can see here called UV. All right, so if I drag onto that, it shows you the UV on this object. All right, if I come into what I started showing you, which is called the UV texture editor. I can, which I can find from under my polygon menu set. Come to edit UVs. At the very bottom, you can see UV texture editor. Now, as soon as I show that, you can immediately see some boxes in our UV texture editor. All right. Now, this texture corresponds to this cover layer. All right. So, one of the things I can do to show you the correspondence is that if I select this UV, you can see that inside the UV editor, it shows me the exact point I've selected. All right. If I do that, I can see that already. If I do that, I can see that already. Do that, I can see that already. All right. So immediately I have a sense of how the UVs are placed in this coordinate system. And then I know that if I want to bring an image and I want the image to go from top to bottom here, then I place an image of this same size and put it within this area and make sure that the top is here and the bottom of that page is here. And immediately you can um, see that same image show up on the cover of this and the cover of our magazine. So you get a sense already of how this works. Now, this is a simple material in the sense that all you have are straight is flat surfaces rather, or you have a flat surfaces. If you wanted to do something more complex, all right, this same method will apply, but you need to then map the surface better so that your image that you bring will better wrap around um, the object that you have created. So in this case, if I show you some of the UV mapping options that Maya comes with, there's something called planar mapping. Now that basically means that Maya creates a plane. It creates a plane and projects that plane onto your surface. So um, and then it how and then replaces or pulls out, if I can use that word, simulates the way those UVs on your object are and uses that as the shape that it does. All right. Now, a plane, because of its flatness, is almost always better. Let me just create each one on our surface and you can see how they work. Now, one of the things that you have to do before you select a mapping method is that you have to select the faces that you want to be affected. In this case, I select all these faces. All right. Or you can select the object um, by itself completely. But for greater precision in your results, I always recommend selecting just the spaces that you need. All right. So in that case, I do that, and then I come to create UV's planar mapping, and if I click on that, Maya creates a plane. All right. And now it uses that plane as some kind of projector and projects that shape on our object. Now, if you notice how the the how this plane is positioned and its direction, which is either like this perpendicular to that surface, um, you can see that all it will see is this slant object. It cannot see the faces because this view that I'm showing you right now. This is exactly what it sees. It's a plane projecting and it's projecting it in this direction. All it can see is this line, which is what we see here. All right, just see the edge because that is all that you can see. Now you sometimes may have to move that plane that Maya has created by clicking at the bottom uh, of that plane, and then it goes into a manipulator mode where you can change things around. Then you can rotate that plane. Notice what happens here as you rotate that plane. All right, rotate that way. Um, then rotate this way. Okay. You can also use the editor here to better match what you're going on. So I put this to 0 and change this to 0 too, so that we have exact 90-degree angles. All right. And then you notice that this plane seems smaller than the object itself. In this case, you want to increase the plane so you can, let me show my editor. Before it was something like this. All right. But usually you want to increase it a bit. And if as I increase it, notice how the UVs on the body of this shrink, because the plane is increasing to fill it up and capture as many of the UVs as possible. The same way, by doing that, I can now used the plane to cover the whole area of my object. So like I said before, you want to bring all your UVs within this space. And so if I did this, if I reduce that scale, you can see it crosses out of it. This is not good. You will not achieve what you want because your image will only always fill this space. So the materials here the material that fall outside will not have any of that texture assigned to them. So I do that so that I can bring it in. Usually you may be able to get a good result just by this, but to be more precise, you want to rotate that so that you better match the surface that you have created already. So I can do this so that I'm sure that I'm better matching it. All right. And then, yeah. So as soon as you do this and you're satisfied with how the object um, covers up the image that you have completed your mapping process. Now, the next stage is this: how do you bring your image in? All right, and how do you um, create an image that just fits the exact size of this? Because that is what you want. This is your UV. These are the UVs that consist on this surface. Now, how do you get your image to fill this? If you don't have knowledge of a photo editing software, I recommend that you get some of that knowledge because it is important for this part of the process. So when I do this, I have all these UVs. Now in Maya, you have to take these UVs out, bring them into a software so that you can match your image to this shape. All right. The way to do that is to select. I I can do the same thing within this um, UV texture editor tool where I right click to produce my um, hot menu and then drag onto UVs and then selecting that shape. I have selected all the UVs. Now note how those same points are highlighted here just to show you that we have those UVs all selected. Now I come to polygons and make a UV snapshot. A UV snapshot simply creates a an image of these UVs in a form that you can take it out and be able to see the outlines of your UV so you can match better. All right. So if I just come out, name this in my desktop, come to a current project, and then just name this magazine UV out. All right. And then save that so we have a name for it. Now the size, usually you want to keep this around 2K so that you have enough of a resolution that Maya has already calculated in already. So I usually recommend something around, or it's usually recommended to use something around 2K. All right. Notice that we've talked about how Maya always defaults to a square. So when I entered this value, immediately increase this value to square, and that is important because you always want a square that it keeps your scales the same. All right. You also want to select the format. that we want. A PNG is a transparent format so that you'll be able to see through the outline that you create and thus be able to see work well with your object. You can change the color of the outlines that you will see, but for now we'll keep it as white. You understand where that white color is. So if I click OK right now and look at this file here, you realize that Maya has saved a file out from our scene. So if I go to that um, project over here, we can see magazine UV out here. This is our PNG. You can see the outlines that we created in white against a transparent background. All right, so if I bring that, pull that into my Photoshop software, drag it in, so you can see that we have a transparent software. So now we get to the fun part where we get to bring in our magazine cover. I've just downloaded a few pictures here, something for WWE fans or Raw fans, and the time. I think I prefer the time cover, right? So I'm going to drag that into Photoshop to put it on my timeline. Um, for people who don't know how to use Photoshop, this may be a bit of a drag, but I encourage you to stick around and try and understand it. Now, note how UVs are placed in the scene. If I select this set of UVs, they are the top UVs. This is the top of our magazine. So I would have to switch around anything I want to put in so that the top remains at this end, all right, which is at this end. So in Photoshop, I have to turn this round, all right, and then increase this. Now, note how I don't want to pass the outline, but let me drag it below it so you can see it below. This is the outline. All right, this is the outline. Now you want to make your image just match that shape. All right, with a bit of imagination, you can already begin to get the idea of this. Now I can simply just squeeze. Now in this point, the aspect ratio of the magazine does not matter any longer. As long as it matches the shape of the UVs you have created, Maya will stretch or squeeze to fit back the shape that you have created. So in this case, pull this all the way here. Image looks stretched, all right, a bit, but when you get into Maya, you will notice that everything works and looks the right way. So I just to make sure that our edges don't show through, I usually pull my texture out. If you are just painting the texture in, make sure that your texture exceeds the boundaries of the UVs that you can see. That way, um, you will not have any spill of a different color into or under your texture. So there you go. There's still this empty space around. I usually recommend filling it with the base color or the colors at the edge. That way, you are sure that um, even when the color spills, you only see your base. You only see the base color that you have selected. So drag that under. Now we're going to save this and bring it back to Maya. But you see our outlines, they will show on the texture if you bring them back. So you have to put off that layer. We have something stretched now and it will look a bit not right. But when we take it into Maya, you will see how it fits it back. So if I save this, uh, um, okay, save this now as a JPEG image. You want to be careful with the sizes of your JPEG um, images so that they are not too large, but at the same time, you need good resolutions also. You need to be careful to keep them. We have already selected a width and height, the pixel ratio. So as long as your image is about that height, you will be fine. So cover in. So I save that. Okay. I have to be careful though. That file is about 1 meg, but I think 1 meg still is good enough. I come back into Maya, and okay, nothing has changed even though we have saved the file. So here I come back into my object. Now I have to create the material that will become the house of our new image, all right, on cover. So I create a assign. That's from pressing and holding my right mouse button to create this hot menu, and then I click on, I hold on, hover over blend and leave it to create a blend material. Now we want to replace the color. Now if I selected and changed the color to green, you will see that the cover is now green. But we don't want a green cover. What we want is the cover image that we created. So you see, same thing. All right. So what you do is this. You probably have been wondering what this check mark on the side is for. It's your way of accessing um, more options that have to do with the color. All right. So if I click that, it shows me a create render node window. Now what you can do here is that you can add more materials, or like I say, you can plug in more other kinds of materials or colors or textures into our color uh, node or color option, so that those materials override the properties of that material that you select, override the color node. In this case, you want to bring in a file from outside Maya. So we select the file um, node there, and then you can see that it gives you a field to bring in an image. All right, so if I click this on the side here and come to my 3D software, my folder, and look for the file I created, which is magazine cover in, all right, and click open. Immediately you see that that image name is now showing here. All right. Okay. In our preview, you can see this. Now, your filter type determines how Maya drops or filters the image to either make it to how will I put this, to define or change the quality of the color and the quality of the image in itself. So usually you want to select off, which is so that Maya does not filter or try and reduce the resolution of the image that you have brought in. All right. So you can already see the sample image, how it fits, it has wrapped in this preview, how it has wrapped the material. But you can't see that here. You can be wondering how you cannot see that there. Remember yesterday we talked about hardware texturing, which is how Maya uses your the CPU memory to show or keep information or keep data uh, about things that you have brought into Maya. So, and I click that, um, it renders that image on that surface so you can see it within the software. If you didn't do that, the image will still be there, but you will not see it except you render the scene out. All right, but when I click that, I can see it, and immediately you see that our cover is right where it should be. And even though you were worried about how stretched our image was here, you can see that when it brought it into the software um, and placed it, it fits perfectly. Now just to test again, by right mouse button, drag onto UV, and coming into our UV editor, you can see that square shape. That is the image that we made, and you can see the outlines that created it. Now, just to confirm that it is this same UV coordinate that is controlling what you are seeing, if I say UV and then I select this UV, notice that on our surface you can see the same colors highlighted here, right? And that is how you are sure that you have put in a cover to your magazine um, 3D object. All right. So just come out of that. All right. So there you have it. You have your magazine cover. You can do the same thing and create inner pages and create colors. Notice the same way. Just select the faces that you want and then use the projection map that works the most. We'll talk about the rest um, following project.